Make sure it works. Okay, it's working. It's the closest I've ever been to being in a boy band, is having this thing attached to my face. I'm sure some of you now can't get that image out of your heads, which is fine. If this goes poorly, I might start dancing, and generations of Gettysburg College students will be thankful for that, I'm sure. Josh said some kind words, but really, students like Josh kind of make my life easy. So the compliment is very much repaid to you. He brought a level of enthusiasm to my classroom and always a funny anecdote or two to liven our discussion of Vikings and Anglo-Saxon kings. It was a funny thing to be asked to give a talk on going against the grain, because I've never really thought of myself as being a person who does go against the grain. I go to bed early. I enjoy a glass of milk before I go to bed, usually. I'm not a revolutionary. I don't have a kind of a revolutionary's heart. And so I kind of had a tough time figuring out what I was going to talk about. So I did what all people do when they have a tough time. I started asking a lot of other people what I should talk about. And the reason why I started asking people was because I was hoping they would give me a good idea. And then I was going to steal their good idea and give it to all of you. The good thing is that all the people I asked said to me, well, they didn't say anything, actually. I said, well, what do you think of me doing this talk on going against the grain? And they said, nothing. They just kind of looked at me. And a couple of them gave a wry smile. And one gave a chortle type of stifled laugh. One gave a very great big laugh. And I said, well, what's so funny? And they all said, you are the grain. And I said, well, why do you say that? And, you know, someone said, well, you wear a jacket and tie every day. So, and that's pretty grainy. I said, okay. Okay, I get that. And then someone else said, well, you really, really love, like, sentence structure. and there's nothing more the grain than, you know, really caring deeply about topic sentences and, you know, people's footnotes. And so I'm like, okay, I'll take that. And, you know, my very, very sweet wife said, well, you have this fervent belief in good manners. And I turned to her and I said, it's not a belief, it's an ideology. It's my only ideology, really, is a belief in good manners. And I said, but there's a reason why I believe in good manners, because we live in kind of this age of perpetual multimedia embarrassment that someone has to believe in good manners, right? And she said, get off your high horse. And I said, okay. Okay. One student this week, I said, I'm going against the grain. And he said, you're a Burkean, meaning that I'm a follower of the 18th century Whig politico Edmund Burke. And I turned to that student and I said, well, why would you say that? And he said, well, because once a year you get up in front of a class and have this love affair with Edmund Burke's writing. You love him because he has a sense of caution. And I said, yes, I do love him because of his sense of caution. And if street signs were personalities, I think mine would be yield. But that being said, you know, I pondered this idea, and I thought, well, when's the last time somebody really asked me what I thought about the world, to give my philosophy of life? And I kind of racked my brain, and I thought about this. And I realized it was April 27th, 2000, very specific date. I do specific dates. I'm a historian. And it was 2 or 3 weeks before I graduated from Gettysburg College. I was asked to give a talk on my reflections on life. It was through a program sponsored by a department here on campus. And I put something together. And unfortunately, I couldn't remember at all what I said or what I wrote. So being a good historian, I ran upstairs to the philosophy department here on campus, and I ran up the stairs of Weidensaul, and I said, do you have my reflections on life? And they said, what are you talking about? I think they knew who I was, but they were a little scared because I was out of breath. And I said, I gave a reflection on life in 2000. Do you have it? And they said, oh, yeah, we have those. So I photocopied it, and I read it. And it was really uninspiring. And so I thought, well, you know, this might not go well. But then I found a good paragraph in it. I'm going to show you the paragraph in just a second. But being a historian, I want to give you context. 2 weeks before my college graduation, it's a time when spirits are very, very high, and for some, standards are very, very low, okay? It's a time when there's euphoria, this mixture of kind of emotions of fear and anxiety, but also great pride in the things that you've accomplished and wonderment that you made it through 4 years at all, okay? So I was feeling that when I gave my reflections on life. And I looked at this document, not remembering most of it, not really remembering what I was saying, and trying to put myself into that mindset. Just so you know, I found a photograph from 1998 in Musselman Library that I think accentuates where my talk is going. What I said, and I will quote for you, on April 27, 2000, "My dream for my life is to be constantly in love with learning, whether historical or biological or literary or political or philosophical. I have begun on a life's journey through the training of our esteemed faculty," because I was a kiss-up, "to a lifetime of embracing the world with all of its faults, its tragedies, its fruitfulness, its forgetfulness. I want to intellectually embrace this world with the reality of a cynic, the heart of a poet, the objectivity of a good historian." Now, it's a really weird thing to be faced with a primary source document from your own past, especially one you don't have that much of a record of. It's far odder to offer a kind of context for all of you about what this is about. But I think there's something important here, beyond the idealism that's present, which wasn't really characteristic for me, I would have to say, when I was a student here. But there's idealism here. And of course, there's self-satisfaction with the quote as well. What I find so amazing about this quote was that 4 years previous, I had no idea what a liberal arts college was. I applied to liberal arts schools in 1996 because my guidance counselor told me I should. Thus I applied, thus I got in. I came to Gettysburg because I loved history, and I thought that if I came here as a student, the botanicals of history would literally infuse my life, creating some kind of a finer elixir of learning. Of course, I didn't actually think that. I was 18. But I thought, if I go there, I'll study history, and maybe maybe it'll pay off. I think it has. Okay. But you'll notice something in the quote, and that's something happened to me when I was here as an undergraduate. I truly fell in love with the idea of learning for learning's sake. Maybe I was a late bloomer in this regard, but I ate up the idea of not only the liberal arts as kind of an educational ideology, but I especially ate up the idea of a liberal arts classroom as being the perfect forum for learning and for self-enrichment and discovery. The question I have as a historian when I look at a document like this is, why was I so idealistic? Why was I so optimism in April of 2000? I said before I was a little bit cynical in college. I know I wasn't the greatest bullet of my generation, okay? So why that optimism? Was it the euphoria of graduation? Was I nostalgic for a place I hadn't left yet? Was it something as simple, like the fact I had a girlfriend, and everything seems great when you're kind of in love, you know? Was it something like that that made me to be optimistic? Well, I think that there are clues inherent within the document. As a student, I was repeatedly asked by our esteemed faculty what I thought of the reading we were doing for class. Okay. I was encouraged to meet with my profs. I was encouraged to have lunch with them. I was encouraged to have a coffee or to have informal chats with them on park benches. And I didn't realize it at the time, but all of this was adding up to something. And that was, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was a contributor to knowledge rather than just being a recipient of it. That I was a part of this wonderful stew that was being brewed in the liberal arts college and in liberal arts classrooms. Okay? I learned to think out loud for the first time. I learned to think on my feet. I learned to debate in a classroom. Debate in faculty members' offices, debate with my peers on steps of the library, and when I was of age, after my senior seminar, debate in the bars outside in town, okay? Amazingly, that idealism, okay, this kind of enthusiasm for intelligent talk, for witty banter with people, has never left. It stayed with me my entire life. Now, context here is key. 15 years ago, 13 years ago, there was no talk, no serious talk, of the threat of online classes, of MOOCs, of webinars, what a tragically awful word the webinar is, okay? Of these things hurting the liberal arts college or the liberal arts classroom. For those of us then who lived in that classroom, who were inspired by it, there was no question of its value. The liberal arts classroom made us think for ourselves because it was unpredictable. Our discussions were unpredictable. We didn't know where they were going to go. It gave us confidence to cultivate our own ideas by getting questions right, and as I like to remind students, by getting questions wrong. You learn something through getting things wrong. The Liberal Arts Forum, a real flesh and blood forum of ideas, produces individuals and not just student numbers. And the reason I became a teacher was because of my teachers, one of them is up there, invested their time in me to help me find answers to great questions, answers that they encouraged me to pose in the first place. These were not dogmatic teachers. They were not these Olympian lecturers speaking down to me on high, trying to impart their knowledge on me. They were real people who wanted to talk me through my intellectual journey and help me mature as a person. They did so across paper-strewn desks. They did so at archival tables, though this is staged. I hate to admit it. It would be great if it was a live shot, wouldn't it? But they did so in archival tables with documents. Okay. They did so in classrooms where we debated these things. Now, in our long history, I think things have endured that are worth preserving. And the liberal arts and the liberal arts classroom is one of these things. We hear a lot of talk in higher ed about the practicality of the liberal arts and about the practicality of small colleges and what people learn here. We hear a lot about the practicality of learning for learning's sake. Okay? And with the notion of practicality, with the word itself, I think is a sinister implication that learning for learning's sake, learning things like how to critically think, how to write in an engaging way, how to contextualize the world, how to debate, that these are impractical things. Even in our culture now, I think there's a distinct anti-intellectualism. It's geared toward, I think, members of the academy and to academics. Okay? And I think in part because a lot of people see academics as esoteric, ivory tower, intellectual snobs. Truly, for everyone who thinks it is chic to be a geek, there is somebody who hates both the chic and the geek for being elitists. Okay. They dismiss the admirable and virtuous quest for knowledge as being irrelevant, or sinister word, impractical. Of course, this is nonsense, it's hogwash, balderdash, to use archaic words, okay? Knowledge undoubtedly makes our lives richer. Education increases our quality of life because it shows us what that quality actually is. We are blessed with complex human minds for a reason, so that we can see them, so that we can use them. And there is nothing, I would say, that's more beautiful, okay, than seeing a mind, especially the mind of a student, working really, really hard on a problem, wrestling with something. Okay? I see this in my office hours all of the time. But seeing students come to you and then eventually come to a brilliant observation on their own. There's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than watching someone with tears streaming down their face because they're so affected by the ending of a novel. There's nothing better than watching an audience squirm when there's a moment of tension in a theater, right? These are the moments when we understand more deeply the connections we have with each other, with those in the past and present, with whom we share both history and a biological sense of symmetry. Now, what does all this have to do with going against the grain? Well, okay. Fair question. Thank you for posing it, Josh. To me, the grain is not your job. It's not a person. It's not the man in an abstract sense. It's not a political ideology. The grain is conformity out of the fear of the costs of non-conformity. It is adoration of the mediocre elements in life because of social expectations, what I'm going to call here shotgunning the ambrosia of life, but not actually tasting it. It is lying to yourself. I know, we'll let that linger a little, okay? It is lying to yourself about the person you want to be because you're too scared to be that person in the first place. It is the simple but profoundly influential and toxic apathy found in the dismissively cruel word, whatever. It is a life lived without consciousness or virtue. The liberal arts classroom, by emphasizing the virtuousness of liberal or broad learning for learning's sake, is the most aggressive vaccine against the grain because it inoculates our students with curiosity and a healthy dose of skepticism. The liberal arts classroom, if done right, makes you think for yourself. And as long as you don't spend 4 years of your life at a liberal arts college shackled to a beer pong table, you will get something out of the experience. You will get a revelation. You will get that moment of transcendental breakthrough and transformation. And those moments don't stop at graduation. This is the type of learning that is meant to prepare you for a lifetime of these transformative moments. I didn't realize I.A. Isherwood back in the day was pretty wise, okay? It prepares you for a lifetime of these transformative moments, for a lifetime of thinking, for thinking both revelatory and revolutionary thought, because every revelation a person has is a revolution in their own right. The liberal arts classroom, through volatility and through energy, but more than anything else, by its emphasis on individualism, subverts the grain. It is nonconformist, it is questioning, it is inspirational with that beautiful, awe-inspiring anarchy of contrary opinions is what the liberal arts, a broad interdisciplinary form of learning, is supposed to produce. Fundamentally, it gives you the tools to go against the grain. Thank you.